You're not on Earth anymore. You're floating somewhere between memory and manipulation, between identity and illusion. You think you're watching a 90s sci-fi action flick, but what if this isn't a movie at all? What if this is your Rekall implant? You remember Total Recall, the mutants, the triple-breasted woman, the exploding heads. But what you don't remember are the secrets buried beneath it, the real stories, the weird facts that never made it to air. Until now. From psychotic puppets and lawsuits to broken ribs and banned footage, this is the real mission to Mars. The behind-the-scenes chaos of a movie that shouldn't have worked but somehow became a genre masterpiece. And hey, if you love this kind of cinematic archaeology, hit that subscribe button. We're aiming for 1,000 subscribers this month, and your click helps us keep unearthing the strange, the forgotten, and the totally bonkers truths hidden inside your favorite films. Because memory is cheap, but weird facts, those are forever. 1. The movie took 16 years to get made. Before Mars exploded in your face, Total Recall lived in development hell. It began in 1974 when screenwriter Ronald Shusett bought the rights to Philip K. Dick's short story, We Can Remember It For You Wholesale. A bleak, cerebral tale with no action, no mutants, no Mars. Just memory tampering and corporate gaslighting. Shusett brought on Alien co-writer Dan O'Bannon, but they only got as far as Act 1. Every studio passed. Too strange, too big, too confusing. And the ones that said yes quickly said no after spiraling development budgets and incoherent drafts. For a time, David Cronenberg was attached with William Hurt as Quaid, more psychodrama than shoot 'em up. Cronenberg's version kept the schizophrenia and got rid of the Schwarzenegger. Then came Dino De Laurentiis, who built sets in Australia and cast Patrick Swayze before going bankrupt. It took Schwarzenegger's influence at Kuato Pictures to finally drag the film out of the sand. By then, it had passed through 40 script drafts, 7 directors, and the better part of 2 decades. So, when you see that Martian horizon, know it's built on the bones of a movie that almost never made it out of the subconscious. 2. Schwarzenegger. Wasn't supposed to star. He stole it. Let's be clear, Arnold Schwarzenegger wasn't the first choice for Total Recall. In fact, he wasn't even considered. Producers thought he was too big, literally. The original vision was a blue-collar everyman, vulnerable, trapped inside his own mind. Someone like Richard Dreyfuss, or even Patrick Swayze. Arnold was too indestructible, but then fate, ego, and muscle combined. While working on another film, Schwarzenegger learned about the stalled Total Recall production. The rights had landed in turnaround, meaning any studio could snatch it up. Arnold, already a rising star, told Kuato Pictures, "Buy this for me." They did. $3 million later, the project was his. He didn't just act, he executive produced, handpicked the director, Paul Verhoeven, and shaped the film into what it became, a visceral, gory, high-octane sci-fi juggernaut. Gone was the everyman. Enter the granite-jawed demigod. Verhoeven even rewrote scenes to make them suit Schwarzenegger's tough guy cadence. Quaid wasn't a man trapped in a dream anymore. He was a man punching his way out of one. The shift changed everything. And just like that, the actor no one wanted turned into the only one who could sell Total Recall's insane premise. 3. Verhoeven shot the film almost entirely in sequence. Watching Total Recall, you feel the psychological unraveling, Quaid's confusion, paranoia, panic. But what you don't realize is that this wasn't just acting, it was design. Director Paul Verhoeven made the rare decision to shoot the film almost entirely in sequence. In Hollywood, scenes are usually filmed out of order for budget and logistics. But Verhoeven believed in giving his actors the same disorientation their characters were experiencing. So from the moment Quaid visits Rekall to the explosive Martian finale, the cast lived that story beat by beat, linearly. This helped Schwarzenegger, not typically known for his emotional range, deliver a surprisingly nuanced performance. He wasn't asked to imagine future events. He had just lived them the day before. You can feel that layering in the performance, each look of suspicion, each twitch of disbelief. It builds naturally, not retrofitted in post. Verhoeven's method gave the story an emotional gravity it wouldn't have had otherwise. When Quaid questions reality, so does Arnold. So do we. And when the walls finally collapse into a dreamscape of red dust and conspiracies, it's not just a story falling apart, it's a man coming undone in real time. 4. The X-ray skeleton scene was CGI history. It flashes across the screen in seconds. A skeletal Schwarzenegger stepping through a futuristic X-ray machine. But what you just watched was cinematic history. In 1990, CGI was still a risky experiment. The abyss had only just scratched the surface. Terminator 2 hadn't even been released yet, but Total Recall pushed forward. That iconic X-ray sequence was one of the first fully CG-rendered human skeletons ever shown in a feature film. It was built frame by frame with early digital modeling tools and required hundreds of man-hours to align movement, posture, and timing with the live-action footage. The result? A moment that barely lasts 20 seconds, but shifts the entire tone of the movie. You suddenly feel the world become uncanny. Surveillance is absolute, identity is skin-deep, and technology is no longer a tool, but a prison. And here's the kicker. The rest of the movie is almost entirely practical effects. Verhoeven chose to save CGI for a moment that would land like a gut punch. That skeleton isn't just a body scan, it's the ghost in the machine. And once you see it, you can't unsee the future creeping in through the cracks. 5. The Mexico City shoot nearly killed the cast. Mars wasn't shot on Mars, it was shot in Mexico City. Specifically, in Estudios Churubusco and various brutalist concrete locations that doubled as alien landscapes. It worked beautifully on camera, but off camera, it was a nightmare. The altitude, the heat, and the local food wreaked havoc on the cast and crew. Almost everyone got sick. Montezuma's revenge hit with a vengeance. Stomach bugs spread like wildfire. Actors were doubled over between takes. Paul Verhoeven himself reportedly wore adult diapers to power through the long days. Schwarzenegger was one of the only cast members who didn't get sick because he had all his meals flown in from Los Angeles. No joke. Even the crew looked like Martians after a few weeks. Sunburned, exhausted, borderline delirious. Combine that with 6-day work weeks, night shoots, and stunt-heavy sequences, and you get a production that felt like an actual survival mission. When you watch Quaid fight for breath on Mars, it's not just acting, it's projection. The cast really did feel like they were being choked by the environment. And in that sense, Total Recall became the rare sci-fi film where the misery was real, and it shows. 6. The Three-Breasted Woman. Almost had 4. There are things in cinema that stick with you. The Three-Breasted Prostitute is one of them. Played by Lycia Naff, she became an unlikely icon of 90s sci-fi excess. But she almost had 4 breasts. That was Arnold's idea. He suggested it after seeing a medical diagram of a cow's udder. Seriously. The makeup department went with it, briefly. Then someone pointed out the obvious. 4 breasts didn't look alien, they looked bovine. They scaled it down to 3, a strange number, but strangely balanced. The prosthetic took hours to apply. A chest piece with hidden wiring and latex attachments that wrapped from her neck to her waist. Naff was hesitant at first, worried it would define her career in all the wrong ways. It kind of did, but it also made her part of cinematic history. When she was called back to promote the film, her role had been cut from the original trailer, and she was briefly uncredited. She was furious, then proud, then kind of bewildered by the whole thing. And now? 3 decades later, she's the one thing everyone still remembers. Proof that sometimes the weirdest decisions leave the deepest cultural scars. 7. Kuato was operated by 15 puppeteers. Open your mind, Quaid. That line lands like a spiritual epiphany, but making Kuato talk required a small army. The mutant revolutionary was no CGI creation. He was a full-body animatronic puppet, embedded in actor Marshall Bell's chest like a second desperate soul. Bringing Kuato to life required 15 puppeteers, hidden in the set, crouched beneath the camera line, operating cables, air bladders, and servo motors to make him blink, grimace, sweat, and emote like a living thing. Bell wore a massive prosthetic torso for hours at a time, limiting his movement and forcing him to act with just his voice and eyes, while Kuato did the expressive heavy lifting. The heat was unbearable. The mechanics malfunctioned constantly. One false twitch and the scene had to be reset. But the final result is unforgettable. A mutant messiah, fragile and fleshy, whispering truth from a ribcage. In a world of biceps and bullets, Kuato gives the story its soul. And the effort to bring him to life reminds you just how far filmmakers once went to make things feel real. No shortcuts, no digital crutches, just wires, sweat, and a dream breathing through rubber skin. 8. Richter's injury was 100% real. Michael Ironside doesn't just play Richter. He is Richter, relentless, icy, practically bulletproof. But the actor himself, he was very human. During a particularly aggressive chase scene, Ironside slammed into co-star Michael Champion with full force. No stunt double, no soft wall. The result? A cracked sternum and multiple separated ribs. It was the kind of injury that could have ended his role, but production was tight, so the studio's insurance team demanded proof that Ironside could still perform. What did he do? He dropped to the floor and started doing push-ups. The agents watched, nodded, and let the cameras keep rolling. For days after, Ironside had to act through searing pain, concealed beneath his tactical costume and grimace. That relentless Richter energy, it wasn't all in the script, it was survival instinct. You can almost feel it in those final elevator scenes when he fights to the bitter end. It's not just character commitment, it's real pain, real exhaustion, captured forever on celluloid. And in a movie already obsessed with the line between real and illusion, Ironside gave us something raw. Proof that sometimes the most brutal sci-fi moments are born from very real flesh and bone consequences. 9. Johnny Cab was made from leftovers. He's grinning, he's glitching, he's driving you through a collapsing dystopia like a perky corpse in a conductor's hat. Johnny Cab is terrifying, but you weren't supposed to think so. He was meant to be comic relief, a goofy automaton in a cheerful taxi uniform, but instead, he's deeply unnerving. His animatronic face was recycled from a mold used in Explorers, 1985, repurposed with stiff features and jerky movements. The voice? Provided by Robert Picardo, who improvised some of the cab's eerily cheerful lines. His deleted joke, "You wouldn't talk like that if I had an Austrian accent," was axed by Verhoeven, who didn't want Arnold mocked. The puppet's eyes rarely aligned, its face barely moved. And yet, it worked. Not as comedy, but as accidental horror. The perfect metaphor for a world where machines try to mimic humanity and fail in all the worst ways. When Johnny Cab explodes into flames while grinning from the wreckage, it feels less like slapstick and more like a warning. The future is here, and it's smiling through its own combustion. Sometimes, the scariest things are built from scraps and still manage to get under your skin. 10. The decompression scene. Nearly got the film an X rating. You've seen the faces, the eyes bulging, the tongue swelling, the skin bubbling like latex in a furnace. It's the decompression scene, when Quaid and Melina are exposed to Mars's atmosphere, and the movie turns briefly into a surreal body horror nightmare. But here's the twist. It almost got the movie banned. The MPAA took one look at those sequences and slapped the film with an X rating. Too much gore, too long, too grotesque. Verhoeven was stunned. This wasn't pornography or torture porn, it was sci-fi. But the MPAA didn't care. To secure an R rating, Verhoeven had to go back and trim the swelling. He cut frames from the decompression shots, shortened the exposure scenes, and removed extra seconds of blood and eye trauma. The result is still intense, but less so than what was originally filmed. Schwarzenegger's bulging eyes, flailing arms, and distorted screams were created using elaborate latex puppets and inflating air sacs. It was a practical effect masterclass, and nearly too effective. So when you're watching that scene, squirming as the human body twists into something alien, remember, you're seeing the censored version. The original would have melted your face right along with his. 11. The reactor set was the largest vertical set ever built. That alien reactor sequence at the climax, the one with rising spikes, collapsing caverns, and the terraforming of Mars, it wasn't CGI. It wasn't a miniature. It was a full-scale, practical behemoth, built vertically. Why? Because studio ceilings were too low. Production designer William Sandell had no choice but to flip the layout and build up. What you're seeing is a towering, real-life set, 12 feet wide, nearly 40 feet tall, and constructed like a vertical corridor so the camera could look down and create the illusion of immense depth. Actors had to climb scaffolding, dangle from cables, and fight gravity just to hit their marks. It was dangerous, disorienting, and unlike anything else filmed at the time. Even the crew had to rig lighting and sound from below, often in harnesses themselves. When Quaid shoves Richter off that elevator shaft, he's really dropping into a void, surrounded by a practical steel and styrofoam Martian cathedral. And that final shot of the oxygen being unleashed, it wasn't rendered, it was engineered. Total Recall didn't just build a world, it stacked it, bolted it, and dared its actors to survive it. Sometimes, the most epic sets aren't wide, they're deep. 12. The film's score is considered a sci-fi masterpiece. You might not remember all the lines, but that music? It sticks. Jerry Goldsmith's score for Total Recall is a high-octane, industrial opera, a fusion of classic orchestration and percussive synths that gave the film its pulse. And it almost didn't happen. Originally, the producers considered a cheaper, more electronic-heavy soundtrack, but Schwarzenegger pushed for Goldsmith, who had scored Alien and Planet of the Apes, believing the film needed weight. Goldsmith didn't just compose background noise, he built a psychological roadmap. The pounding bass lines in the action scenes mimic the rhythm of a heartbeat in panic. The eerie, otherworldly themes during Quaid's memory crises mimic a brain glitching under pressure. And that final cue, when Mars is transformed into a livable planet, a triumphant, soaring anthem, equal parts catharsis and cosmic wonder. Goldsmith composed 80 minutes of music in under 6 weeks, conducting a full orchestra and weaving analog synthesizers into the mix like alien instrumentation. Today, the Total Recall score is studied in film schools and ranked among Goldsmith's greatest achievements. It didn't just support the story, it told a second one, Beneath the Surface. And once you hear it again, you realize the music never lets you wake up. 13. Sharon Stone. Trained like a martial artist for the role. Before she was Basic Instinct's femme fatale, Sharon Stone was Laurie, Quaid's faux wife and embedded assassin. Cold, calculating, seductive, brutal. And she trained for it like a fighter. Verhoeven didn't want Laurie to be just another screaming wife stereotype. He wanted her dangerous. So Stone worked with stunt teams for weeks, learning high kicks, grapples, gun handling, and disarms. She practiced until her kicks reached Schwarzenegger's chest. The result? A character who flips from smiling domesticity to lethal operative in a blink, and sells every second. That apartment fight where she takes down Quaid? Choreographed like a real ambush, with camera angles that show off her technique. Stone insisted on doing most of her stunts, taking hits, rolling with impacts, and nailing her own falls. Off-screen, Schwarzenegger reportedly told Verhoeven, "She's going to be a big star," and he was right. Stone later said the role taught her discipline and gave her the confidence to go toe-to-toe with alpha male leads. Laurie isn't just a fake wife, she's a symbol of the movie's paranoia. The one person you trust turns out to be the blade at your throat. And thanks to Stone's training, that betrayal cuts deep. 14. Douglas Quaid. Was originally named Douglas Quail. Before Quaid was punching holes in Mars, he was Quail. Douglas Quail. That was the original name from Philip K. Dick's 1966 short story, We Can Remember It for You Wholesale. The story is more psychological fable than action spectacle. A meek office drone who dreams of being a secret agent on Mars, only to find out it may already have happened. Sound familiar? In early drafts of the script, they kept the name Quail, but it didn't land right. Studio execs worried it sounded too bird-like, too passive, not exactly the kind of name you'd slap on a Schwarzenegger character. So they switched it to Quaid, tougher, punchier, closer to Quake. The change worked. Quaid sounds like a guy who breaks walls, but the essence of Quail remains. He's not born an action hero, he's manufactured into one. The tension between who he was and who he thinks he is, that's the beating heart of the movie. So when you hear, Quaid, get your ass to Mars, remember, you're hearing the weaponized version of a man who used to dream small. The name may have changed, but the existential crisis stayed the same. 15. The opening dream sequence sets up the whole movie. If you're paying attention, the movie begins with a dream. Quaid walking on Mars with a woman, stepping over rocks, breathing the thin air, then falling, gasping, choking as his visor cracks. But that scene isn't just a teaser, it's a map. Everything in the dream already contains the story's ending. Melina, the girl he hasn't met yet, Mars, the place he hasn't visited, and death by decompression, the fate he nearly meets again in the finale. It's a breadcrumb trail disguised as a nightmare. Later, at Rekall, the technician lists the specs of Quaid's fantasy package: exotic location, secret agent, alien artifact, brunette companion, and all of it plays out exactly as predicted. The dream is either a premonition or a memory trying to break through. Or, and this is the deeper twist, it's the beginning of the actual Rekall implant. The movie never tells you if Quaid wakes up. You might still be watching the fantasy. That dream at the start? It could be the trigger moment when the implant begins. It's a cinematic sleight of hand, a dream so loaded with prophecy that you miss it completely. Until the credits roll and you start wondering, did Quaid ever wake up at all?